Hey everybody, welcome to C3 Films. I'm Cheryl and this is
Chris.
today we are going to do another episode of It Wasn't That Good and we are talking The Hobbit, the first movie of the trilogy, maybe a little bit of the other ones, but probably not. So if you haven't seen it yet, go ahead and watch it and then come back because we're going to talk spoilers. Let's get started. Chris, how do you feel?
So the funny thing about this movie is that I love this is such a common theme with me in watching these not that great movies. I love the first 15 minutes.
No, I completely disagree. But it's
Oh,
probably
really?
for another reason. I'm assuming you haven't read the book.
No, I haven't.
So I guess like one of the problems that maybe some people have with The Hobbit is that it's so different from the book. And the reason why is because, well, if you think about like the size of Lord of the Rings, and that's three movies compared to The Hobbit, and that's
Right.
also three movies, it's just very, very dragged out. Like, there's so much filler and like lots and lots of fluff. And the first 13 minutes, actually wrote it down, 13 minutes, is all fluff. It's all like completely unnecessary. Like, just get right to the story. It's just too
Really?
much. Yeah, like I mean, I guess I could kind of see because you get like the backstory and you get like the whole thing with Bilbo and Frodo and all that stuff. But Frodo's not even in that book. And
Right. I remember someone else telling me that too.
yeah,
Yeah.
I will say it was cool to have some of the characters return from Lord of the Rings and like you see them show up in The Hobbit because it's for the fans, and as a fan I enjoyed that, but it was also very unnecessary, and I think I would have liked the movies better if it wasn't so fluffy.
Right. And I think so. It's funny because I didn't read the books. There are other parts of of the movie that feel like fluff to me. But the beginning of this movie, what it felt like was, especially since I had just got done watching The Fellowship of the Ring right before it, it actually felt like a kind of corresponding piece to watch along with it. So I get to see the actor that played Bilbo in The Fellowship of the Ring playing Bilbo again at the beginning of this movie. You get to see Frodo, and I'm getting this feeling like I'm watching a scene that takes place right before the beginning of the Fellowship of the Rings film. And so for me as just a fan of that type of storytelling, that was fun to me because especially I'm like thinking to myself, well, this movie was made years after the original Lord of the Rings trilogy was done. So like if I can go back and watch The Hobbit and it actually seems as the appearance of fitting within the larger narrative, similar to like going back and watching Clone Wars and the Star Wars narrative or Rogue One, then I I like that. So that's the part of the beginning of the movie that I appreciated was being able to see these cast of characters before we end up going to Martin Freeman playing a younger Bilbo. And for me, it felt like the situation of, hey guys, we are actually able to get the same actor who played Bilbo, but for the sake of this story, since this is a younger person, we're casting the younger person too.
Yeah, I honestly I think that part is fine, but in combination with that whole backstory with Thorin and
Right.
Azog, the the bad
The
guy.
pale orc.
Yeah, he wasn't even in the book, so
I was gonna say he wasn't in
yeah,
the books,
he
right? I
wasn't
remember
in the
someone told
book.
me that too.
Basically, they were just making a whole nother like history thing, but it's like made up where it's just very very similar, almost like identical to the whole situation with Isildur versus Sauron. Like it was like the same thing, and it didn't need to be there. They honestly they just put it in the story so that they could have more story, and that made
So
it
they could
even
pad it out.
longer. So when I watched it the first time, I was surprised. I was like, who is this guy? I don't remember any of this. And then, like it started like the movie was like, oh, it's been a while. They haven't even gotten to Mirkwood yet. I was like, this is too long for the Hobbit, and I didn't know that it was gonna be 3 movies. And when I found out that it was gonna be 3 movies, I was like, you're joking, because the Hobbit is a very short book, and I was like, I can't imagine what they're putting in this movie to make it even longer, but the story is basically not the same at all.
Right. Yeah. And so it's interesting because we're taking this from two different perspectives, right? We're taking this from the perspective of someone that didn't read the book versus someone that did. And the fact is that we both walked away from the movie feeling the fluff in the movie because the stuff that's added almost feels like it's added. There's something about it where you're like, this doesn't seem to track with some of these other scenes that I'm seeing in this story. When you see the game, for instance, played with Schmeagol and Bilbo, that feels like something that's from the book. And the scene feels good. And I love that scene. The scene is absolutely great. Um, but I can't say the same for some of the other scenes that happen in the movie, especially because a lot of the conflict in this movie is only a conflict because the script finds a way to remove Gandalf from the story. And then when the characters can't do anything, it reinserts him back in this Deus Ex Machina sort of fashion, and he saves the day. Like literally, all the major conflicts that arise in the movie are solved by Gandalf. And it's funny because when you watch the first Lord of the Rings movie and they talk about the adventure that Bilbo has, Gandalf literally says, "I didn't have much to do with it." He says that to Frodo. But based off of what we're seeing, he had a lot more to do with it than what he let Frodo than what he let on with Frodo.
So it's definitely been a while since I read the book, but actually Gandalf does do a lot to help herd them along in the story. So that isn't really untrue to the book. However, there is a lot of added stuff, like you said. That scene with Smeagol, and or like Gollum and Bilbo, that's definitely one of the highlights of the book. It's 100% from the book, almost like to the T. The dialogue, the riddles, and stuff. It was like the most captivating chapter of the book, and they definitely did that part justice. So I think for the parts that like came from the book, they did do it justice. They did follow it. I do have a problem with the Eagles. Same, I have the same problem with the Eagles that in Lord of the Rings, but more so in The Hobbit because I read the book and I know more about the Eagles than is depicted in the movies. Um, I guess I'll just bring it up now. Um,
Please do. I'm curious because I was gonna ask. I was gonna
yeah,
ask anyway.
because the way they use the Eagles in the films are kind of like a get out of jail free card where Gandalf can just call upon the Eagles whenever and then they'll just come by and like rescue them. In the book though, there is a scene or like, you know, a chapter with the Eagles, and the Eagles can talk. They are like a different race and they talk to Gandalf and they are very stern with him. They're like, I don't want to help you. Why should I help you? Kind of like, you know, with the Ents in Two Towers, I think, where like they were like, this is none of my business, so I'm not gonna do anything. And so so they have a relationship with Gandalf, but they're unwilling to help him all the time. Like they're not BFFs. Like they will help him out of respect, but they are definitely not like someone that he can just call upon whenever he feels like. So I don't know what it's like in Lord of the Rings, but in The Hobbit, they definitely have this conversation with Gandalf where like they just don't want to help him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's very surprising because that's like I think that's one of the other things people constantly bring up with Lord of the Rings is that why don't the Eagles just fly them to Mordor or why don't the Eagles just fly them to the Lonely Mountain?
Mhm.
Um, but that what you're talking about adds context and makes it so that you can't just use the eagles whenever you want because yeah, like the Ent, they're not trying to get involved.
Yeah, I
So
wish they put that in the movie, but it wouldn't be
yes,
consistent with the world that they built in Lord of the Rings. So, but I don't like the way they depicted the eagles in either movies.
right. So then my question to you is, are the brown wizard that
Not in
felt
the
like
book.
something that they added?
Not in the book. But I do like Radagast. He's funny. I like his character. It's definitely not necessary at all. And I definitely think they used him as a tool to add the Nazgul stuff, the Necromancer, which obviously is hinting at the stuff that's going to happen in Lord of the Rings. That's also why they had Galadriel and Saruman meet with Elrond. None of that is in the book.
Right.
And they had all of that there to like do setup for Lord of the Rings, which I also think isn't necessary because we we don't need setup for a movie that already exists.
Right. Yeah, I think that's because they're trying to like add this kind of like connecting fiber so they can feel like you can sit down and watch all these movies like back to back. I so I had a similar feeling like it didn't feel to me that The Hobbit needed to be three movies, but I remember asking myself if maybe it needed to be two based off some of this information that they were trying to have. Because like when I tried to think about the idea that they would get to Smaug, um and have the conflict with Smaug and then defeat Smaug and then have like I guess that's my question. I don't know how much of that third Hobbit movie is from the book. Spoiler alert for Smaug, Desolation of Smaug in the third Hobbit movie, but Smaug is dealt with in the first 15 minutes of the third movie, and I'm not sure if that is the end of the book or if that whole thing where the king was like where Thorne's trying to get his throne back and everything, if that actually happens in the book. Do you remember?
I do remember the ending of this. This is what I was talking about earlier. It was a really dry ending for the book, where like everything up until that point was very exciting and it felt good to read, but that very last bit where like he basically just writes and tells you like everything that happened without describing what happened. So it would almost be like you know how the end of Lord of the Rings is like there's a lot of things to tie up the loose ends. I
Yeah.
feel like it was similar in that aspect where the last chapter is basically like a little segment about what happens to each person, um, and like the description is just very dry. Like this is what happened, not and then this happened and then this happened. So
Right.
so in that aspect, I think that the movie probably did better in the way that it was doing the storytelling for the ending of The Hobbit, but a lot of it is made up. It's not even in the book. So,
Right.
um,
I know that it wasn't in this movie, so it's not fair to judge, but I know one of the things that was in the other movies that wasn't in the book was the love story between the dwarf and the elf.
yeah, that's not in the book. That's not.
Yeah.
She is not even in the book. Neither is Legolas. His
Wow.
dad is. His dad's in the book. But yeah, basically the only people from Lord of the Rings that are in The Hobbit are Bilbo, Gollum, Gandalf, and Elrond. No one
Oh, okay.
else.
So
No one
Elrond
else.
is in the story in the book too.
Yeah, he is. He actually does help them read the map and stuff in the book.
Okay. Yeah, that scene that was another scene that felt like it did not feel like filler. It felt natural within the context of the story. And I guess that's one thing that's nice is that they tried to find a way to weave it in like with all these different things that they added. But the problem is that there are just points where it really does feel like it's dragging. It does feel like it's too long, so you can feel yourself becoming bored while watching it. And so yeah, like I don't remember what my initial feeling was. I don't remember if I thought when I went into this movie that I would see them meet Smaug in this movie, but knowing what I know now, I just I find it disappointing that there's all these exciting bits that you want to get to see and they feel dragged out. Like I don't think I dislike this movie as much as I dislike Smaug because literally the entire movie is called Desolation of Smaug and it's building up to that conflict and then the movie just cuts off. So like that bothers me. That bothered me more because I felt like I was getting really excited for that. In this movie, I don't know that I had that expectation that they would meet Smaug in this movie, but I it's hard for me to say because on one hand, I felt bored and if certain scenes dragged on, but then the scenes that worked really worked for me. And the final piece is the music. Like I can never get tired of hearing the Lord of the Rings like score every time. Like and it's recycled in this and there's other like new original scores and like it's it's always exciting and it always feels epic.
I definitely feel that casting Martin Freeman was an excellent choice. He did a great job being Bilbo, and he just fit so well. Like, that was just a really good casting. And it was fun to watch him play Bilbo. Like, if anything about the movies, seeing him play Bilbo just felt like the book was coming to life. Like, any scene that he was in. Um, the scene where they all go to his house and have dinner, that's all book. And it just, anytime there's a scene that came from the book, like, you know it, you feel it, and it feels good. They're just all so spaced out, and all this
Right.
other stuff is thrown in there. And I think, it might be a mix of having I know Peter Jackson directed it, but I think someone else was supposed to direct it, and so that maybe caused a lot of uh, chaos with the consistency of the storytelling. I also feel like it probably felt wrong. Sorry, not wrong. Well, wrong, but long because it had um it wasn't like the end of the world like Lord of the Rings was. Like the the context of the world and the situation in the world of Lord of the Rings is dire for everyone in every scene because everyone is not infected, affected.
Yeah.
Having a problem
Affected.
with words right now, but everyone is affected by what's going on in the world in Lord of the Rings. But here, in this point in history of Middle Earth, there's nothing really big. It's just an adventure, and that's literally what it is, an unexpected journey that Bilbo Baggins has, and it turns into this whole other thing where like who is actually the main character? Is it Thorin? Is it Smog? Is it the other dwarf? And there's just so much going on, and there's so many people to pay attention to, like all these different characters with their subplots that basically hijack the movie, and it really feels like that. And honestly, I think it feels like it's dragged out because it's not about Bilbo, but the book is about Bilbo and his journey and his growth. But it, these movies just become about so many other things.
Right, and that's because they wanted to make it into a trilogy when they didn't have that much content, enough content to make a trilogy. Uh, so a scene that I thought was from the books, but I only thought it because I thought it was from the books because it actually is expressly mentioned in the Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring film. The scene with the trolls, that like so I thought that scene was from the books, but some of the things that happen in that scene make me wonder if it's actually from the books. And when you watch Fellowship of the Ring, they get to this like after Frodo gets stabbed, when he wakes up, Sam says, "Hey, look, Bilbo's trolls," because he's telling the story about how he stopped these trolls and like talking about his journey. So I was like, okay, so when we saw this troll scene, I was thinking, okay, this has to be from the book because this is a part of Bilbo's story, and they actually expressly mentioned this in a movie that came out before this movie came out. But was that was that actually from the book, or is that something they just added as a kind of Easter egg?
It was from the book. It was an Easter egg in
Okay.
Lord of the Rings from The Hobbit. That was a nod to The Hobbit in Lord of the Rings. So yeah,
Okay.
it was from the book.
Nice. Yeah, so like things like that I think are cool. Like I like all the things that help to build the world, and that's probably one of the reasons why I liked Fellowship so much. But when those things are happening in The Hobbit, I'm having a good time. It's just kind of the other stuff in between that they're adding to try to make a short children's book into like a 9-hour epic. It's like,
Yeah, it
yeah,
doesn't really
this
work.
doesn't work for me.
Yeah, I mean, they could have made The Hobbit as one movie, which would have been like a really concise movie. I think if it was 3 hours, it would have been a concise uh, depiction of the book. Maybe it could have been two movies, um, but even for me, I feel like that would have been too long. Maybe if it was two short movies, like two-hour movies, that would have been good.
Mhm.
Um, but three 2.5 hour movies.
Too much.
No. They
So,
could have
do
made
you,
another movie with all the other stuff. They could have made a trilogy just for Thorin and his business and stuff like that, and separate it
right.
from The Hobbit.
I could see that, and maybe so that's why they try to combine it. But I wonder, when writers or creators they make these fantastical worlds, people want to have an excuse to go back to them. Do you feel like you'd want to go back to the world of Lord of the Rings? It's been like what, like 8, 9 years? Well, maybe a little bit less, like 6 years since the last Hobbit movie. Um, do you feel like you miss that Lord of the Rings world and want to see more stories told within it, even if it's not based off of a novel?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more that Tolkien wrote that is not in a movie. So it's kind of like Star Wars, where there is this world that is there, and there's a lot of history. It's, a lot of the characters are very old, like Gandalf, Galadriel, Elrond. They're all very old, and they've all been in certain points of history. So I think there's a lot of room for more stories to be told in Middle Earth. And even if they were made up, it still would be fine because the world exists. There's just a lot of history. We don't see a lot of dwarf history. I know that there was this whole thing with Thorin, but wouldn't it be cool to see what happened in Moria and stuff like that? As opposed to seeing the aftermath. Like, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of history. Everybody has, is a son of whoever and stuff like that. Even like if we got like the history of the Ents and stuff, and we get to see the Ent women and stuff like that. The Ent
Right.
wives.
I It's funny because yeah, I remember when I was watching this movie and I saw them and they were going to like I saw it was about the dwarves and everything. I was wondering, oh, are you gonna get to see what happened in the mines of Moria and then them awakening the Balrog? Because that would be amazing. Um, yeah, but either way, like that's not what happened. But that there's definitely intriguing things to see within this world. I agree. But yeah, is there anything else that you wanted to say before we close out here?
No, I mean, I would really just be nitpicking at a lot of the stuff. I I think maybe one more thing is just I don't like the way they did Thorin in the movies. They actually made him kind of annoying, because he's so like, I hate elves and no, and he's like super stubborn, but he's not really like that in the book.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought all dwarves were. I'm stereotyping here. I thought all dwarves were like stubborn and they're aggressive.
I mean, kind of, but they were all like going on a thing together, so it just wasn't like, they were part of a party that was mostly dwarves. So the conflict with the elves was definitely made up. He didn't really the elves were not really involved in the Hobbit until they go to Mirkwood. And I guess like there's the whole thing with Elrond and stuff, but like Gandalf was like, we need to go see Elrond and stuff like that. So it just wasn't really as big of a deal in The Hobbit as they made it in the movies. And it just felt like they were definitely using it as a device to like give him a thing to like prevent them from, you know, going for help with to the OP elves because they made the story so fluffy. But if they had just like left all that stuff out, they wouldn't have needed to make Thorin be so annoying.
Right. Fair
Such a
enough. No, yeah.
naysayer. He like basically the whole time he was like, "No, I don't want to go that way because the elves are there," and stuff like that. So it's just okay. I mean, he in the book they trust Gandalf, they trust him, but in the movie he's like, I don't want to do it because the elves are there. I don't like screw you, Gandalf. I'm gonna do what I want. No, they're like, oh, if Gandalf is saying that this is a good thing to do, we're gonna take his advice.
Right. They trust his word. Yeah. I'd be definitely very curious to like read the books, or read in this case the book, and see the differences for how we get from scene to scene. Because in the scene that you're talking about, Gandalf leaves, which is what allows them to be captured by the trolls, which then allows Gandalf to come and save them while Bilbo stalls for time and the sun can come up. So yeah, so I'd be kind of curious to see more of that stuff. But yeah, definitely agree that it could have definitely truncated things down if they weren't so married to trying to relive the glory days of the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, because that's what this was. That was them trying to recapture that magic with three more movies. And unlike certain other film franchises like Harry Potter, for instance, there wasn't the content for it.
Yeah. I mean, if you guys haven't read the book, if you haven't read the book, I think Chris, you should read the book. It's definitely an easy read. It's for 12-year-olds. It's really fun. You could probably read it in a day or two, over a weekend. I'm gonna do it because it's going to wash away the horrible moviness, and redeem the characters for me. So, and then maybe we could talk about it again.
Okay. Yeah, I gotta go to Barnes and Nobles and pick myself up a copy. But yeah, was there any other little closing thoughts before we close?
Nope, good.
All right. Well, did you guys see the movie? If you did, what did you think about it? Did you think that it was too long as well, or did you think that it was just great to be able to be back in this world and you were just happy to see these characters again and you didn't really care how it related to the book or how much of it was padding? Regardless, whatever you thought, comment below, let us know. And while you're down there, if you give us a like, share, and subscribe. Even if you don't, though, I have been Chris, and this has been
Cheryl, and we will see you all next time.